cars and steam locomotives. There is arguably a lot of really good ones of those two things. But sadly, there's also a bunch of really bad ones. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. The top 6 worst steam locomotives and worst cars. Now, how I'm going to do this is I'm going to do 3 steam locomotives and 3 cars. I'm going to do each in how bad I think. So, number 6 is going to be like the best of the 6 that I have in this video. And then number 1 is going to be the absolute worst thing I've ever seen. Now, try not to lose your sanity, just like me, as I go deep into the world of bad trains and cars. Number 6. The London, Brighton, and South Coast Railroad E2 class. Oh, great, it's the Boxers. That isn't actually an official nickname. That's one that I came up with because of how stubborn it is. That's a nickname I came up with because of how stubborn these were. They just could not do their job. Okay. So these 060 tank engines were built for the London, Brighton, and South Coast Railroad sometime in the 40s, I'm pretty sure. I don't really know because I don't really have a script right now. But all I know is that they lasted at around that time. Now, these things were intended to replace the S100 class. Why would you replace the S100s with these? Because these things absolutely sucked. Okay, one of the problems was the wheelbase. It was just way too big. They had a lot of trouble going around corners. But that's not the only problem with these things. Well, the other problem is that they were extremely slow. This also explains why I call them boxers, because they are stubborn, very, very stubborn. The only difference between the Boxer and the LB&SC E2s is how I love Boxer. My dog Thor, he's a Boxer, and I love him. But I hate these. I actually hate these so much. I would have put them on number 2, but I have something very, very horrific in number 2 spot. But anyway, back to the E2s. Another reason I put them in number 6 is because they did inspire Thomas the Tank Engine, one of the most iconic cartoon characters of all time. So you gotta give it that. But that doesn't mean they were still bad. They still suck, and I still hate them a lot. Some of these locomotives were actually given to the Southern Railway, as seen in this picture right here. Now, it would actually suck to be the Southern Railways because I don't want these on my roster. I would just have a bunch of S100 classes because they were very good at their job, which these weren't. So yeah, that's why I have these things on number 6. And now it is time for number 5. The Ford Pinto. If you're a car person watching this video, then you will know exactly why this is on here. If you see one of these driving on the road, don't you dare rear end them. That's not something you want to do. Don't follow these cars. Okay, why exactly? Well, it has to do with where the fuel tank was mounted. The fuel tank on the Ford Pintos were mounted behind the wheels. I mean the rear wheels, of course. So whenever you rear-end one of these cars, you and it would blow up in a fiery inferno. Now, don't actually worry too much because you won't actually find any of these still on the road because they all blew up. And if you do end up seeing one of these on the road, please just pray that they moved the fuel tank somewhere else. Okay, but really, what happened here? In the 1970s or 60s, because I don't have a script, remember that, Ford decided to make this, and I don't know why because I don't have a script. But yeah, But yeah, a lot of people were making fun of it. Oh my god. A lot of people were making fun of it because of how often they blew up. And I honestly don't really have anything much to say. So yeah, that's why the Ford Pinto is on number 5. And now it's time for number 4. The Citroen Pluriel. Okay, so we're still into cars right now. Introducing this thing. Yeah, it sucks, and I think you can tell why. Well, you actually can't tell why, because it actually has to do with the roof. But before that, first of all, ew. Ew. Ugh. So, yeah, it isn't a very good-looking car, is it? But anyway, speaking of the roof now, this car probably has the stupidest convertible system I have ever seen in my life. So the fabric part in the middle goes down electrically, and then you have to put it in the trunk, which is weird. But that's not all. You then have to take the side pillars off and leave them at your house because there's no room in this very tiny car for them to go. This means that if you're just driving around with the roof down, like having fun, yeah, and then it starts raining, well, too bad you have to get wet. These things also produce, no power at all. They were very slow and ugly, if you can't already tell. I mean, just, what is that? Looks like a Toyota Prius that was dropped into the cartoon world. And the Prius isn't even a pretty car anyway, so why would you make it look like this? Yeah, if you can't already tell, I hate this thing a lot, and I don't want to see it anymore. Please get it off my screen. And now it's time for the top 3. Number 3 time. The Soviet Railways AA-20. Okay. That is a lot of wheels. It's not only the wheel problem that was so bad, it was its power. It was too powerful. Okay, let's start at the beginning. Apart from the fact that it kind of looks like a New York Central Niagara, these things there was only ever one made, but it absolutely sucked. You see, the Union Pacific was running 412-2s for a while, and the Soviet Railways wanted some of that, so they decided that they would make a 414. I'm starting to think that's too many wheels. The reason why this one was much worse than the Union Pacific ones is because the Union Pacific didn't have very many corners, and the Soviet Railways did. Every time this thing went around a corner, it would derail. And not only that, they were too powerful. they were too powerful for the couplers they were using, so it often just broke loose and ran away. And, they were also extremely heavy, because, yeah, there is an amount of wheels that becomes too many. The couplers they were using were very, very lame, to be honest, at the time. But it wasn't just the couplers, it was, yeah, what am I even talking about right now? Oh, yeah, I was talking about how heavy it is. Yeah, it broke every single rail line it passed over, every single switch point. So, yeah, that's convenient. Anyway, let's move on now. And now it's time for number 2. Now, if you don't remember from the E2 segment, I said that I have something much more horrific in this spot. Well, I behold to you the Ford Nucleon. Now, to be fair, it wasn't actually a car, it was just a model. But it still sucks. It sucks so bad that I just had to put it on the list, and I had to talk about it. Now, the name Nucleon sort of sounds like nuclear. Well, that was the idea. It had a small nuclear reactor in the back, powering it. Ford's envision was that they were gonna replace gas stations with nuclear charging station stuff. What they didn't think of, though, is what would happen in a crash. Maybe having a nuclear reactor in the back isn't the best idea. Now, what is it with Ford's having trouble getting rear-ended? Okay, so if you crash, it could radiate the area for 25,000 years in a small fiery mushroom cloud, which is not very nice. Now, if you have a bunch of these on the road and they all crash, then the whole world will be nuclear reactive. What am I saying right now? The whole world would be radioactive, which I don't want that. I thought Chernobyl was bad enough. I don't want the whole world to be like that. But yeah, not gonna lie though, I kind of like the looks of this thing. It looks pretty cool. But yeah, getting into a crash isn't the only problem. You see, when the old reactor does eventually stop working, which sometimes it does, you have to get a new one. How do you dispose of the old reactor? Someone wasn't thinking here. So yeah, if you want the whole world to be radioactive, buy one of these. Okay, it was also just supposed to be a concept car. It was never intended for production, but still, why? Now, before we go any further, let's take a look at some honorable mentions. And now, everybody, here we have number 1. What's it gonna be? Oh, I already know. The Bulleid Leader class. Oh my gosh. Now, you're probably really confused right now because you're probably thinking that you thought this was a list of the worst steam engines in cars. You're correct. It is. I might have confused you right now, but yeah, this is a steam locomotive. Now, the creator, Oliver Bulleid, really liked steam locomotives. He wanted steam locomotives to be able to compete with diesel and electric locomotives. And doing so, he made his new locomotive look like this, like the electrics and diesels at the time. except this one is hideous. But yeah, making a steam locomotive like this meant you had to change how a steam locomotive worked. Having two cabs at both ends is one of the advantages of a diesel, and yes, the Leader had that. But that only was an advantage to the engineer. It was a huge disadvantage to the fireman, though. The fireman had to work in a tiny, cramped area that you could only enter through a crawl space. Now, who thought that through? Not only is that just inconvenient, it's very, very, very dangerous. If anything went wrong, which it will because of the valve gear it was using, the fireman had no way of escaping. In a regular locomotive, you can just jump out of the cab. It isn't that hard. The fireman had no choice. And none of this safety stuff had anything to do with why this project was canceled, thankfully. The project's cancellation was because it was too expensive to operate, which is defeating the purpose of even building it. Like, what the heck? How could you mess up a steam locomotive this badly? I mean, I thought the AA-20 was a bad mess up, but this, it wasn't doing anything right. It was using too much fuel, and it was too expensive to maintain and very, very unsafe. Now, I have actually been meaning to make a video about this class for a while. Just, I didn't really have enough time to do that, and I also kept forgetting about that, and I just didn't want to make a script. I mean, I didn't want to make a script so bad that I didn't even make one for this video. I just used all that from muscle memory. All that information was muscle memory. But, yeah. I hope you enjoyed me going on and on about bad trains and bad cars. I hope you have a good day. Now, goodbye now. I think I'm just gonna leave.